This is my water. It doesn't come from the city, it doesn't come from a community well, and it doesn't travel through miles of somebody else's pipe. And it doesn't arrive with a rate increase or a warning notice or the faint aroma of something that ought to be living at the bottom of a pond. It comes right out of the ground right here on my property. And today I can walk outside, open a faucet, fill a cup, and drink fresh water straight from the source beneath us. There's no brown sludge, no bad smell, no stains slowly appearing at the toilets or the showers like the plumbing is developing a bad tobacco habit. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't a DIY project. Getting here required a drilling crew, several contractors, a whole bunch of planning, and this guy who finally decided that a local water company couldn't provide a dependable water source. Maybe it was time to build a very small water company of my own. So stay tuned and I'll show you how I did it. So, living out in the country, outside the city, there's a lot of pretty nice advantages. You've got room to work, I've got room to build, and there's enough distance between the neighbors that nobody needs to know exactly how many unfinished projects are hiding behind the barn. But, a lot of times living in the country also means that some of the basic services can get pretty complicated. And for our water, it started with a local water service company, and then it was bought out by an interstate water corporation. And over time, the relationship started feeling less like a utility service and more like an endurance test. It was crazy. We were dealing with water outages. We dealt with a lot of low pressure. We received these really aggressive notices. We also received notices that indicated that required water quality testing had been missed. These rates kept going up, and while water coming out of the faucet could smell bad, look brown, and leave brown staining in our toilets and showers. I've got pictures of the brown sludge. I've got the notices, and I definitely have the bills. And eventually, all those things led to one very simple question. What the heck am I actually paying for? I don't live in some fantasy land. I understand that we gotta pay for reliable service, but what became harder to understand was we're paying more and more for water that I trusted less and less. And the final straw for me was another rate increase paired with the same bad-smelling brown water. At some point, complaining about a problem becomes less productive. So for a DIY-minded person like me, that's usually when the tape measure comes out. So even though I'd love to do it, my plan wasn't for me to personally climb onto a drilling rig and start punching holes into Texas. There are some DIY projects, and then there are some projects where small mistakes can leave several hundred feet of expensive equipment permanently buried beneath your yard. So for this plan, I was going to be the general contractor. That meant I had to figure out the sequence, hiring the right professionals, coordinating the work, and deciding which parts made sense for me to handle myself. So the drilling crew would drill and set the well, and I brought in a concrete contractor that would reinforce the wellhead and pour the foundation for what would be the well house. And then I went ahead and had a guy come in to build the well house over that foundation, pretty much to save time. Then I would take over the trenching, the plumbing, and the electrical work needed to connect the new water source to the house. So on paper, it all sounds pretty organized, but in reality, it meant coordinating people, machinery, concrete, pipe, wire, weather, and a hole in the ground that had absolutely no interest in your schedule. But the basic idea is pretty sound. You put a specialized work in the hands of the specialist, manage the entire project as the owner, and then use my own labor where it could make a meaningful difference. This isn't one of those jobs or videos where I'm going to try to prove I can do every part of the job. I was just trying to make sure that every job got done correctly. So the first step is bringing in the drilling crew. And the water well crew doesn't just arrive with a shovel and a hopeful attitude. They arrive with the trucks, tanks, hoses, drill pipes, mud processing system. and a rig tall enough to make the surrounding trees feel like they should be wearing hard hats. Before the drilling can begin, they have to choose the site, and once that site is chosen, all of that equipment has to be positioned directly around that one carefully selected point. The rig has to sit over the future well. The support equipment needs room to operate, the hoses have to connect the drilling operation to the fluid system, and the crew needs a work area that won't turn into a complete chaos once water, soil, and drill cuttings start coming back out of the ground. The drilling rig has to be set perfectly level because it's about to drop hundreds of feet of pipe straight down, and if it's not level, that pipe's going in crooked. The tall mast guides the drilling equipment vertically. Sections of the drill pipe allow the crew to keep advancing it deeper and deeper, and while drilling fluid travels through the system, helping cool the bit and carry the loosened material back to the surface. They even add kind of like a gelatin to the mix in order to keep the edge of the well solid and stop it from caving in. And kind of ironically, as you start to look at the returning mixture coming out of the well, it looks less like precision engineering and more like somebody has opened up a commercial mud spa for the heavy equipment. You know, this whole mess, it kind of has a purpose. The returning fluid gives the crew information about what the bit is passing through, and while the processing equipment helps separate the material and keep the operation moving. And from a distance, the drilling can kind of look repetitive. The rig turns, the crew works on controls, another section is handled, and the hole goes deeper and deeper. But up close, every part of that cycle matters. The operator closely watches the rig, the crew watches the returns, and the pipe is raised, connected, and sent down one section at a time. This is also where being the general contractor means knowing when to stay out of the way. I mean, I could ask some questions. I could watch the process. I definitely could make sure that the larger project stayed on course. But the people running the rig knew what the machine was telling them. And my most valuable tool during this phase wasn't a wrench. It was restraint. Eventually, the crew reached the point where this stopped being merely a deep hole and it started to become a water source. And that is when the next phase begins. So if drilling finds the water, completing the well makes the water usable. And the crew installed the components that would protect the opening and bring water back to the surface. Then the pump assembly and its connections had to be lowered into place. This part of the job involved a great deal of expensive equipment hanging over a fairly small opening. This meant that there was wiring to prepare, pipes to guide, connections to make, and a pump that has to travel down 300 feet into a well without being dropped, damaged, or introduced permanently to the center of the earth. So basically, the service truck's boom carries the load while the crew guides the assembly into the casing. One section goes down, the next connection is prepared, and the process continues until the equipment is positioned exactly where it needs to operate. Now, this may not look like the most dramatic looking part of the well construction, but it is definitely one of the most important. A successful hole in the ground is interesting, but a properly completed well that can reliably deliver water is much more useful. And once the well was set and the wellhead established, we could finally begin building the permanent infrastructure around it. The wellhead needed protection, so I wanted to build a well house, but the well house needed a foundation. So I kind of got 2 for 1. So I hired a concrete contractor that would pour a floor that pretty much would handle both jobs. The concrete reinforced the area around the wellhead, and it created a clean, durable, working surface and gave the building above it that solid foundation. Remember, I'm on sand out here. And you know, this is one of those project steps that can kind of seem secondary until you imagine the alternative, which is important plumbing and electrical equipment just sitting in the dirt, mud, moisture, and whatever else decides to crawl underneath the door. Concrete's not that glamorous. It's heavy, permanent, and completely unimpressed by your desire to move something 6 inches after it cures. And this is why the planning has to come first. You got to understand the well location, the layout of your walls, your equipment clearances, your plumbing path, your electrical path, and access all had to work together before the truck arrived. And once the floor was placed, the project had crossed another line. We no longer had only a well, we had the footprint of a small utility building. But I couldn't just go with the regular building. That small utility building got a little ambitious. So this is where the project becomes more DIY. My personal contribution became less managerial and considerably more physical. Before the slab and the well house could be built, I needed to prepare 2 underground runs back towards the house, the water and the electrical power. I had to dig a trench. Yeah, sure, there are some machines that are specifically designed to dig trenches, right? And I'm familiar with those machines. I've seen photographs of them. I've even used a couple of them, and they're pretty cool. But I was also worried about a buried cable that was going from my main power to a pool house, and some of these tree roots. I didn't want to really tear into them too hard. I wanted to kind of be gentle with the dig. So I grabbed a hand tool. I went ahead and marked the route, and over time I just got to digging and slowly developed the realization that the ground beneath Texas contains pretty much more Texas. So I had to, plan the route before digging. It needed to connect the well house to the house. I needed to try to avoid the obstacles of the trees and provide a sensible path for both the water line and a direct bury electrical cable. And with that, just start digging. And for the first few feet, it makes you feel pretty productive. And then the next few feet kind of encourage more reflection. And with all that reflection, eventually, every tree root becomes a personal disagreement. But progress is progress, and once the trench was open, I placed the water line so it could pass through the future slab, and then I laid the direct buried cable alongside it, but brought the cable up outside the slab, and later it entered the well house through the sidewall to reach the subpanel. From the subpanel, I wired the pump and supporting electrical equipment. On the plumbing side, I connected the pipe from the well equipment, routed it through the trench, and then tied the new supply into the house. The trench had to be deep enough and clear enough for the installation. Both the pipe and the cable had to be protected, so it was like 18 inches down, and every connection needed to be inspected and tested before I covered anything. Because, the trench is an opportunity when it's open, but after it's filled, it becomes archaeology. So with the water line connected and the electrical work complete, the system could finally operate as one project instead of several unrelated construction sites. The well could send water to the house, the well house protected the equipment, and the filtration system addressed the iron and the brown sludge we had lived with before. Then came the least celebrated step of an underground utility work, putting all the dirt back. So the trench was backfilled, the disturbed ground was graded, and the property slowly began looking less like we were installing municipal infrastructure and more like somebody actually lived there. The physical work was nearly complete. All that remained was finding out whether the entire plan had actually solved the problem. But since completing the well, it's been a remarkable difference. The toilets and showers no longer develop that brown staining we dealt with before. The water no longer arrives carrying that familiar bad smell. And the iron blocking filtration system is removing all the material that created the brown sludge. The water looks better and tastes better. And instead of traveling through miles of somebody else's system before reaching our property, it comes directly from the source right beneath us. And I can walk outside, open up a faucet, fill a cup, and drink fresh water straight from the source below. This project required professional drilling, concrete work, construction, planning, coordination, trenching, plumbing, and electrical work. Now, I didn't personally perform every trade, and that was never the point. Being a capable DIYer is not about pretending specialties are unnecessary. is about understanding the project well enough to know what needs to be professional, what you can reasonably do yourself, and how all of those pieces must come together. So did I DIY this whole thing myself? No, but I did act as a general contractor. I hired the expertise where the job demanded it, and then I supplied my own labor where it made sense and where the ground was apparently feeling vindictive. The result is a private water system, an air-conditioned well house, useful storage, cleaner plumbing fixtures, and water we're actually going to enjoy drinking. So the local water company answered our concern with another rate increase. I answered their rate increase by building my own water company. And it's a very small company, but I tell you what, it has 100% customer satisfaction. So if you're dealing with unreliable rural water or considering a well of your own, leave your questions in the comments. And please subscribe to Texas DIY Coach for some more real projects, honest lessons, and the occasional reminder that rinsing the right machine is usually cheaper than proving how stubborn you are. I also have a lot of footage that was cut. If there is a particular part of drilling a well you want to know more about, then add a comment below and I'll turn that unused footage into a short. Until then, I'm Scott. It's hot in Texas, but at least I have plenty of water.